Um, I know I'm a little bit late on the Ruben Amorim discussion, but there was a lot of noise going on yesterday, and I thought, let everything simmer down, and we can give you our views from gunning to Old Trafford, as well as what do we think, or where does the club go next to from here. Guys, before we get in, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification to stay in touch, in tune, and independent with everything from an Arsenal and Manchester United perspective. So obviously by now it's kind of old news that Ruben Amorim was sacked yesterday by Manchester United. And I think this kind of brings out a lot of discussions around was the sacking justified? Was Ruben Amorim right to be sacked? Where to next for Manchester United? And, what does this tell us about the ownership of Manchester United? So I think, there's a lot of things to unpack. The thing that I want to start off with is, was it the right time to sack Ruben Amorim? And was it justified to sack Ruben Amorim? So let's, it's a bit of a complex one, and I think we need to unpack it a little bit. And this needs to take us into, last season and then into this season, and then it tells us whether it's justified to sack Ruben Amorim. And I think the discussion starts off from before Ruben Amorim joined Manchester United. Ruben Amorim plays a distinctive style of football, a 3-4-2-1. And that's the way he's played at Sporting, and that's the way he intended to play at Manchester United. So from the get-go, Manchester United employed a coach to play a 3-4-2-1 system, which essentially is your three in the back, your three central defenders, your two wing backs, your two holding midfielders, and then your three up front, which kind of alternate. And we've seen that, and we've unpacked it a few times before this. That's point one. Point two, when Ruben Amorim joined Manchester United, he said that we're going to suffer before it gets any better because the players we have don't fit his system. We need to get players out and bring players in. Yeah, and we haven't been able to do that from when he came into Manchester United. The third factor is we finished 15th last year. So if it was purely based on results, then Ruben Amorim should have been sacked last year. But the club in the hierarchy decided to hold on to Ruben Amorim, backing him, saying he's their man, and they wanted to see out this project. Yeah. And the last thing is we lost in a Europa League final to Tottenham Hotspur, a team that never wins anything. We lost to them in the Europa League final. And if it was purely down to style of football and, losing big games, then that should have been the reason why they sacked him. So now we fast forward to yesterday, which was the 5th of January, 2026, and we ask ourselves, why was Ruben Amorim sacked? Was he sacked because of results? The answer is no, because there were moments during last season and many moments during this season where he could have been sacked for results and he wasn't. Was he sacked for formation? No, he wasn't, because again, he made it quite clear from last season that he's going to stick to this formation irrespective of what happens, and he's not changing for anyone. And they could have sacked him at any point. So why was Ruben Amorim sacked? And the answer is glaring, right? It's out there for everybody to see. The reason Ruben Amorim was sacked is because he challenged the hierarchy of Manchester United. And, something that the Glazers have not liked and Ineos is that anytime a coach or a player talks out against them, they find their way out of Manchester United. We've seen it with Cristiano Ronaldo, where he openly threw the Glazers and the United ownership under the bus, and lo and behold, a few games later, he was sent on his way. Yeah. Ralph Ragnick, when he said we needed open heart surgery, he was meant to come in as a advisor or football director to Ruben Amorim, and or Ten Hag at that time. Sorry, not Ruben Amorim. And he was let go because he openly challenged the United hierarchy. And when Ruben Amorim came out in the last two press conferences talking about, he's not going to quit, people should be doing their jobs, he'll stick to doing what he needs to do, I knew the writing was on the wall. And it's clear that the hierarchy at Manchester United are a sensitive bunch. They don't like being questioned, they don't like being challenged, and most of all, they don't like being wrong. And it's clear for everyone to see that this transfer window was a big mess up by Wilcox and Sir Jim Ratcliffe and his team, which led to the fallout with Amorim and eventually getting him the sack. So those are the reasons why I believe Ruben Amorim was sacked. Got nothing to do with results, got nothing to do with formation. It's got everything to do with pettiness and everything to do with the Glazers and Ineos not wanting to be seen as the ones at fault, so getting rid of him and using him as a scapegoat as soon as possible. And I think that kind of says a lot about our ownership at Manchester United, and it says a lot about where this club is currently and how far we're away from being back to where we deserve to be as giants or juggernauts within not English football but within the global game. So I think this is damning on the Manchester United hierarchy, damning on everybody involved from a corporate perspective at Manchester United, the footballing side as well. And I think now that they've sacked Amorim, there needs to be heads that need to roll, right? Because clearly they're painting this narrative that, Amorim doesn't play a Manchester United style of football. We need to get back to our basics. How is Umar Barada, a Manchester City CEO, going to bring back the Manchester United way of play? How is Jason Wilcox going to bring back the Manchester United way of playing? They backed Ruben Amorim. They've now sacked Ruben Amorim. And in any proper functioning organization, the executive that make the bad decisions need to also fall on their sword or bite the bullet. So I would like to see others also, within that hierarchy being thrown away from a Manchester United perspective. Before we jump into what's next for Manchester United, let's jump into what's next for Ruben Amorim. I've seen a few clips of Ruben Amorim after being sacked, leaving Carrington. He looked super happy. I think he knew the writing was on the wall. You can go past. The writing was on the wall. That's Zainab, everybody. Just no, she can't. You're not on there. Don't worry. What's your take on Amorim sacking, Yusuf? He knew the writing was on the wall. He gets a cool £10 million plus his staff, and I think he knew he was fighting a losing battle at Manchester United, and I think he moves on knowing that he tried everything that he could, and Manchester United, unfortunately, are the ones that are going to suffer based on this, because with Ruben Amorim sacking, I think he'll find another big job in club football. I wouldn't be surprised if he finds himself in the Premier League again. I see him potentially, now that, people are talking about Pep potentially leaving, there could be a room for Amorim to join Manchester City, because, they were earmarking him for that role before he joined Manchester United. And I don't see this stint at Manchester United turning people away from Ruben Amorim. So I think Amorim at City in the near future, don't be too surprised about that. But I guarantee you that within the next 6 months to a year, Amorim would have landed himself another role in football, and I think we'll see the class manager that he is once again. And I think this is a loss for Manchester United, and to all the fans or so-called fans that are celebrating Ruben Amorim's sacking, be prepared in the next 18 months to be doing the same thing, because the same people that are calling for Amorim's head or are happy that Amorim was sacked are the same people that wanted Ten Hag sacked, the same people that wanted Oli sacked, is the same people who wanted Mourinho sacked, and this is a never-ending cycle. And for me, a standout club that showed that if you back your manager, you kind of get the benefits of that. It's Arsenal Football Club. They backed Arteta. He's been through a lot, but you now see a vision, you see a system of play, and you see that Arsenal are set up better than what they were before Arteta came in. And I think the similarities of what Arteta inherited versus what Amorim inherited, the culture, if you think about, Aubameyang and the fallouts that he had, compared to the fallouts that Amorim had with players, the style of play that Arsenal were doing, the lack of mentality, the lack of physicality. We're seeing all of that at Manchester United. The only difference is that the Kronkers decided to back Arteta, and you're now seeing the fruits of that, whereas these cowards that are the Glazers and Ineos, the moment their fragile egos are challenged, they had to go to the route of sacking Ruben Amorim. So I'm happy for Amorim because I think he will land on his feet. But I think, this entitled bunch of fans and the toxic media have put on this facade that makes Manchester United fans feel like a sacking is what we need. All that happens now is that we have to recycle. And this entire cycle starts all over again. Alex, Amorim spotted happy after sack. Maybe he's also tired. 100%. And I think, Alex, you've hit the nail on the head with that comment. I think Manchester United has been a graveyard to great coaches over the last 13 years since Sir Alex Ferguson retired. And, you see them physically drained. You see their quality being questioned. And I think for Amorim, like I said, this won't do too much harm for him. I think he'll land on his feet, and I guarantee you he'll come back stronger because he is one of the coaches for the future. He's a young guy, and had we had the courage to back him, we would have definitely got the fruits of this. But unfortunately, we won't be able to see that through. So yeah, that's all on Ruben Amorim. Where to next for Manchester United? Another whole cycle starts, a new project. What happens to the likes of Cunha, Mbeumo, Sesko, etc.? Were they Amorim players? Dogu? Does the new coach that come in, do we need to reshuffle players? Is this an opportunity for the likes of Rashford to get back into the squad? Is this an opportunity for Andre Onana to come back into the squad? I mean, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and we'll see where that takes us. But what we do know at this current point is that Darren Fletcher will take over in a short-term interim base, while Manchester United look for an interim coach for the rest of the season. So Darren Fletcher confirmed that Johnny Evans will be his assistant coming into the game on Thursday. And then we start the hunt for an interim manager, one that takes us through to the end of the season. And there's been some names thrown around. Michael Carrick is one of them. But the strongest discussion so far, and the one that looks the most credible, and I think Alex has hit it the nail on the head again, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has kind of made his interest known that he wants to be part of, take over the coaching again up until the start of the season, up until the end of the season. And I think this tells me two things about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. One, I think, from an Ole perspective, he knows the club, and I think it will be good for us But from a second point of view, it tells us that Oli was always a yes man to the Glazers. And that's why he suffered the first time around. And I think he's going to suffer the second time around. The results might get a little bit better. We know the new manager bounce, and we know how these players always try to, fool the new man coming in. But Ole Gunnar Solskjaer looks the most likely to get the interim job after Darren Fletcher and Johnny Evans kind of take charge within the short-term interim base. Jump into the comments. Let us know, what do you think about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer coming in as a second stint? Are you happy seeing Ole come in? Do you think that will make a difference to our squad? And are we going to hear things again like, get the book out, Ollie's at the wheel, and then are we going to try to make him permanent again after a stint at Manchester United? And I hope not. Before we move on to potential long-term coaches, just some thoughts from my end. What I'd like to see now that Amorim is gone. Obviously, I'm not happy that Amorim is gone, but that's the life of football. We need to move on. Who would I like to see come in as that interim coach? And I've heard it discussed by Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt as well. But for me, I'd like to see Roy Keane come in some capacity to Manchester United. I think Roy Keane... so, two things. The one thing that makes me nervous about this sacking of Amorim, I think he's going to be the last coach at Manchester United, or the last manager at Manchester United that would have any sort of power. I think anybody coming in now is probably going to be a yes man for Ineos and for the Glazers in order for them to, toe the line and drive what they want going forward. And I think, we've seen that the moment Amorim challenged them, he was sacked. And to be honest, I would like to see Roy Keane come in, because I think he would challenge Ineos, he would challenge the Glazers, and I think he's become more mature over the years. He understands his faults, he understands how to manage his anger, and I think he'd be a good interim coach for Manchester United, or at least an assistant in the interim. And I think he can definitely sort out the culture within the club. So even if Oli comes in as the interim manager, I would implore Oli to go in, knock on the door of Roy Keane. I know Roy was down in Norway to watch a couple of games with Oli. Maybe bring him in as your assistant or within your staff to help instill some of that old Manchester United ways. Alex again, Oli can see future potential, like he suggests to sign Haaland when he hasn't even played at Dortmund. Yeah, 100%. I mean, Oli coached Haaland in the early days when he was coaching in Norway. He definitely can pick that up. But again, I think, Haaland, Bellingham, all of them linked to Manchester United. I don't think they're the players they are if they opted to come to Manchester United at that point. I think we are a graveyard for managers, and we are a graveyard for top talent at the moment. We need to get our fundamentals sorted. We need to get our core sorted before we can think about, being a club that can develop talent, that can unearth these great players, and that can get the potential back. So, while Oli can do that, I think he needs to see how we can bring in some experience and at least get Manchester United going to a certain way. So, Oli at the wheel in an interim basis looks like it's most likely happening. And then Roy Keane as an assistant, I think that will be a fantastic mix. And then finally, for the final, towards the end of the season, if they don't, and we can't trust these Glazer fuckwords to do anything correct, if they don't make the interim manager permanent, when the end of the season comes, who is available for Manchester United? Obviously, there's been names thrown around. Glasner at Palace, he looks really good. But again, I think he's a coach or manager that likes control, and I don't think he suits the Glazer and Ineos mold. Unai Emery, good evening. That would be fantastic from a Gunning to Old Trafford perspective, because then there's that full link, kind of full circle. But good evening. Again, will he leave Aston Villa and the great work he's doing there to come to Manchester United? Where at Villa, if you look at the structure at Villa, it's the owners and then Unai Emery, who's second in charge, with the sporting director, all of them kind of reporting into him. Whereas at Manchester United, it's the owners, the Glazers, then Ineos, then the sporting director and the technical director, and then the coach. And I think Unai Emery would get frustrated, and I don't think he'd be able to operate as freely and as fluently as he is at Aston Villa. We then have Thomas Tuchel. I know that name has been thrown around. Thomas Tuchel, his contract comes up with England after the World Cup. Maybe he goes on, has a fantastic World Cup with England, gets them far into the tournament, and then looks to come to Manchester United. I wouldn't be too upset about the Thomas Tuchel coming into Manchester United. I actually wanted him at a certain point, where I thought he would do great things for Manchester United. He's a bit of a disciplinarian, one of those, old heads, operates like one of those old school managers, and I think he'd do fantastic for Manchester United. And I wouldn't be upset seeing him come in. Again, another problem, like with Glazner, like with Unai Emery, is that Tuchel likes control. That's one of the reasons why he had a fallout with the Chelsea hierarchy. It's because of that control. And coming into the structure, if, Amorim was sacked for challenging them, do they want a strong personality? And that kind of puts us there. And then I see Alex and Shady kind of talking about Xavi. Xavi would be a fantastic signing for Manchester United from a managerial perspective. A legend of the game, understands football really well. He had a good stint, obviously, at Barcelona. And I think he would do really well at Manchester United. But are Manchester United willing to give Xavi the time to mold Manchester United to play the type of football that Xavi likes? Quick passing, quick transitions, getting those pacey wingers, etc. With those strong midfielders strong midfielders. Is that something that this ownership are willing to back? Will they hold him and will they run it? So let's see. Nathan Reddy, Southgate seems like a yes man. Oh my goodness, Nathan. Why, Nathan? Why? This is definitely an Arsenal fan jumping in with that. I was trying to not say that name because it's almost like Beetlejuice. If you say the name too many times, they kind of appear. And I was hoping that the Southgate name doesn't pop up, because I wouldn't touch him with a 10-yard stick, I don't want to see Gareth Southgate anywhere near Manchester United. But Nathan has a point. He's definitely a yes man. He would definitely suit what Ineos and the Glazers want, and he could be a potential. And then finally, another potential that kind of just popped up recently, Luis Enrique from PSG. He's refused to sign a bumper contract at PSG, meaning his contract comes up at the end of the season. Is Luis Enrique looking for a new challenge? Is Manchester United a big enough challenge for him? Or is Manchester United going to be, like in The Lion King, we have the elephant graveyard. Is Manchester United going to be a notorious manager graveyard for all these great managers that come in? So yeah, some of the managers that I was talking about, we've got Unai Emery, Oliver Glasner, Tuchel, Xavi, Gareth Southgate, Luis Enrique, and obviously, if Zidane is still not in a job after the World Cup with the likes of France, because I know he's earmarked for France, that could be a conversation that's also happening in the background. But I don't trust this ownership to be pragmatic about it and to get the right man in. I think they will pull the trigger and do something out of the ordinary and bring in somebody that's not worth bringing in. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this entire situation. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. If you're just joining and you haven't heard, go back. We spoke through the Amorim sacking. We spoke through what's next for Ruben Amorim. We've spoken about what's next for Manchester United, the interim manager that's coming in, as well as the permanent hire in the summer. So let's see where that takes us. But one thing's for sure, this ownership are the worst ownership in football. This definitely puts a damper to any transfer activity that's meant to happen. And we'll be lucky if we finish in the top 6 come the end of the season. Guys, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. And with that, we are going to Old Trafford. Thank you, everybody.